I know all of you, glad that you came. This is a very important to the district. The board had approved in the spring contracting with Fielding International to look at a 30-year plan, to look at the infrastructure, to look at educational innovation, to look at where we want to go in Dearborn Public Schools in alignment with community interests, aging buildings, beautiful buildings. That's part of it, but then part of it also is innovation and where we need to be in the future. That Wayne Gretzky quote that I know you like, it's like Wayne Gretzky used to always say, if you didn't know, one of the greatest, probably the greatest hockey player of all time, I will skate to where the puck's going, not where it was, and that's I think what we need to do here. So I want to turn it over to Fielding, and we appreciate having them. Oh, and I want to mention we have President Jim Thorpe from the Board of Education here as well. We had board members that were at some of the sessions yesterday at both Dearborn High and at Etzel. And then this is also online, this one, right? Yep. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So as was just mentioned, we're here from Fielding International. So that is an architecture and education firm. We're an integrated firm of architects and educators, and we get to work all around the globe. So we're lucky enough to have that global perspective and also some local expertise. And honestly, we were talking about this earlier. We've had the fortune to go into a lot of schools. This is my third time inside Fordson, and I have to say it's the most beautiful high school that I've ever been in, and probably the most beautiful school building that I've ever been in. And we don't say that lightly. It's awe-inspiring, which is a pretty amazing word, the word awe. Being an architect is it's a wonderful and an exciting profession, honestly. It's a passion-driven profession, and to come up and walk up to a building in a school and just have your jaw drop, to be able to go into the school, especially as a student, if you can imagine that, and just be able to be in this space all day, it's just really wonderful. And so to be able to have a chance to be immersed here as we talk today, and then imagine what happens with this building in the future is just really lucky. So we just wanted to set the stage with that tonight as we start our conversation. Thanks. So I guess we'll back up for just a moment. So my name is Jessica Stickler-Lipson, as many of you know already, and I'm an architect and principal with Fielding, and I'll let the rest of our team introduce themselves.
Mike Postumus, I'm an education design principal with Fielding. So we're an integrated firm. We have extremely qualified architects and designers, but also educators. We work together on projects collaboratively so that we can approach this from both the lens of facilities and education. And I just want to add to something that Jesse mentioned, which is this is an awe-inspiring building, but part of a master plan is to make sure that students have that experience throughout the entire district. And so a lot of this is planning for that future so that it's not just happening in small pockets. So, and I'll pass it over to Zach.
And my name is Zach Baruta, and I'm an architectural designer with Fielding International. So thank you for your time today, and look forward to a good discussion.
I'm Janet Jefferson, and I'm an education designer with Fielding, and I'm so excited to be here, so thank you.
Okay, so already mentioned and told you a little bit about who we are and what we do, so we'll make our way through these introductory slides. But we really focused on this integration, so this idea of aligning the education environment, the vision for learning, and the education program. So that's what we'll talk a lot more about today, what we started talking about back in the fall, and really where we're going, as we just mentioned. And so what are we doing here, and why were we hired? We mentioned that a little bit ago, but we were hired by the district for a 30-year facility master plan. What is a master plan? So a master plan deals with the scope, so what the projects will be, and then timeline, so phasing, so when they would occur, what the needs are, and how we would prioritize that across the district over time. And so it really strives to answer the 4 questions that you see on the screen. So how many buildings are needed to support Dearborn's projected population? So we've engaged in a series of enrollment projections in a demographic study to understand what the future of Dearborn looks like in terms of those demographics, to understand the needs from a numbers perspective. Number 2, how can facility updates best support shifting approaches to teaching and learning? So we talked a lot about that in the fall, and we'll review that and talk more about that during our time together tonight. Number 3, how do we ensure Dearborn Public Schools is prepared for future planning, growth, and change? we know that the world is changing, and so what do we imagine that to look like, and how do we prepare Dearborn for that change? And then number 4, how do we provide equitable access to opportunities for all Dearborn Public School students? How do we make sure, as Mike was saying, that all students have equal opportunity to experience these moments of awe and exciting opportunities? So this is our process. We started in the fall by really gathering all of the information and data points that we would need to make decisions to plan for the future, and here we are now in February, planning for that future and understanding what it might look like. So our agenda and objectives for this evening are really to gather information from you and ask you to help us along with this process. So that falls into 3 major buckets or 3 major questions. So again, we want feedback to understand about that vision and space alignment. So how might we align Dearborn's vision for the future of learning with the physical environment? And then resource distribution. So how might we distribute resources throughout the community to ensure all students have equitable access? We want to understand what resources you use and need and want for the future. And then tradition and innovation. We heard a lot about the idea of tradition and legacy and how important that is for Dearborn. So how do we balance that with the needs and wants for future and change? And with that, I will hand it over to Mike.
Thanks, Jesse. So I'm going to flip through kind of some of the context of the work that we did this past fall leading into today, some of the data that we have to inform this vision for the future of learning. So going back to that the idea of Wayne Gretzky skating to the puck, not to the puck, but where the puck is going. Where is it going? What is the future that Dearborn wants for its community? So we conducted 29 focus groups. We had 460 or over 460 people engaged in that, and then over 200 students from elementary, middle, and high school that worked with us. We also conducted a survey and had almost 2,000 respondents respond to that survey, which is a really high response rate for something like this. And then the team has surveyed and walked 33 different schools in the district to kind of do their own facility assessment to see what's going on in those buildings and understand kind of the specific context or where it's situated and the challenges and opportunities of those sites. So the main kind of very highest level takeaways from all of this work and kind of consolidating the information is that the community is certainly excited about the opportunity for change, that Dearborn has some really unique features in terms of how people, we called it just stick around in this district, which is amazing. It's a really strong district, and there's, to Jesse's earlier point, a lot of legacy and a lot of people that are staying and are committed to this community, which influences the way you think about facilities and even how change occurs. There are existing barriers that are getting in the way, so everything from very basic needs like heating, cooling, plumbing challenges there, to also structures surrounding the approach to teaching and learning that educators can be frustrated with. So frustrations in many different levels and in many different ways that are getting in the way of the highest achievement possible for educators, potentially. That's what's felt. And then finally, this notion of balancing tradition and innovation as being an important thing for the whole community. We did a lot of great opportunity, or we had a lot of opportunities to work directly with students, but also get feedback from staff and community members. And so some big takeaways from what we heard. First of all, people are excited for how it was described as space to breathe. I think that was a specific response from a student. So having some space to spread out to be able to do activities and things and not feel condensed in their learning space. The excitement for more hands-on and workshop type learning experiences. The excitement for learning to continue to be connected to more meaningful and relevant topics that kids are excited about or are important for their futures as they're going out and looking at career pathways or however they choose to live their life beyond high school. Differentiation, so having different types of experiences that can support the learning that they need to do so that you can maybe learn things in different ways depending on who you are or what your skills are. And then these last 3 are consistent trends that we see in many schools, but certainly surfaced which is the need for facilities to be both flexible, so there's a wider range of uses of space, variable, so different qualities, so sizes and shapes and types of environments, and then the notion of agility, the ability for space to quickly change and adapt depending on what the need is. And these three things are really important to kind of a future readiness or a resilience to all the change that is happening with schools. So we can't predict all of those things, so these three qualities make it easier for a school to still be relevant and functional for many years. So, and then in the survey, we had, that was the almost 2,000 respondents, so 60% parents, 20% instructor and staff members, and then about 8% students, and then others beyond that. And we asked multiple questions in the survey, but three that were particularly important for tonight's conversation. One, what are the things that you want to see students practicing for their future? What are the skills that they need to thrive in their future? And so the top three that surfaced from the survey were critical thinking and analysis as being the most important, and then just behind that, reasoning and problem solving skills, and then finally creativity, originality, and initiative. And so this is kind of some areas that we're thinking about in terms of how do the learning environments support students practicing and doing these things. And then the next question is, all right, to support those things, what are the experiences that should be provided to students so that they can grow in these skills? So the top three here were real world applications, so that meaningful and relevant learning context. The second is hands-on activities, things where kids can actually roll up their sleeves and actually get to work doing things, creating projects, working on actual problems that are in front of them. And then three, exploring different career opportunities within the community. So connections to what's in the world around students and what are the things that might get them excited to actually be at school and to learn and do their best work so that they can start thinking about their futures. And then finally, what are the priorities in Dearborn? So these surfaced as really critical data points for master planning, and number one is the safety of buildings. And it is certainly indicative of just kind of our current climate in schools. Students need to be able to show up in school and be safe and know that they're gonna be secure and they'll be taken care of. And so that is a clear number one here. The second is academic programming. So after safety, let's think about making sure that the spaces actually support these things that were just described, problem solving, hands-on learning, workshops, things like that, that are meaningful and relevant to students. And then third, the functionality and comfort of the buildings. So that responds to things like heating, cooling, ventilation, so that when not only do you feel safe and secure, not only are you having great academic and high quality learning experiences, but also we want them to feel comfortable and still have functional spaces that are supporting those basic needs of learners. So that leads us into something that is very important, which is related to just kind of the big picture of a master plan. What are the baseline needs? What are the things that we need to think about for every single building in this plan, every single building in the district? And we heard this from students, or the data we used to kind of establish these came from students and staff and community members in our first engagements. So natural lighting and controllable lighting, which is really important for creating great conditions for learning. Reliable heating, cooling, and ventilation, so this is clearly a priority. A variety of flexible spaces aligned to learner needs so that we have environments for students with special needs, but also ensuring that the core academic spaces that most students are inhabiting are really supporting great teaching and learning practices. Of course, ADA compliance and accessibility, so making sure buildings are compliant with what's needed, and in some cases beyond compliant. Intentional acoustic and sound management, so when you have these activities like workshops and labs and things that are more active in the learning experience, when you're adding more of that, they create sound. They're buzzy, I like to say. So ensuring that these facilities are designed in a way so the active learning isn't distracting of other learning experiences. Thoughtful storage and access to resources. We heard a lot from staff that they have a lot of great resources that they like to use with students, but feeling like they don't have enough space to store them, or they don't have the space to display it so kids can go and use it easily. And then the last two, very important, the reliable safety and security systems, a major priority, and then clean and inclusive restrooms. So these emerged through all the work as being kind of a baseline of what all facility we need to look at in the master plan, all facilities we need to approach with this mindset, or all facilities providing this at a baseline level. So that's a really important data point that we've collected so far. And then we also gathered some information on what do people feel like is getting in the way of doing their best work, whether it's for a student, their best learning, or for a staff member, their best teaching. And so there were 3 kind of big buckets that came out of those questions. So one is resources, the second is mindsets, so just kind of where people are at mentally about school and learning, and then 3 are the physical structures. So within resources, it's things like people emerge or discuss the idea of different types of training, having the right transportation to get places, and then those baseline needs. For mindsets, it's things like consistently shifting priorities. This is a challenge in schools in general across the United States, where priorities are kind of always popping up and sometimes getting set aside, and so there was a feeling that that was a challenge. This bottom one, trauma response, we see more and more trauma exhibiting or surfacing in classroom environments, and that can be disruptive to learning for other students and to the student that's experiencing trauma themselves. And so managing that and helping mitigate that is important. And then structures as an example, so again, the physical space, the schedule, how schedules can impact quality experiences is something that people felt might be problematic. And then you see some ideas like standardized assessments or a rigid curriculum. And so it's important to know that these were expressed as things that people felt like were getting in the way of doing that visionary work, the things that they want to be doing in 5 or 10 or 15 years. And so these are the areas that we want to be mindful of as we think about creating space to support that future. You take all of this data together and we said, okay, what are the ways that we can use this and simplify it into some key domains or themes that we can use as we begin planning for the future, planning for the next 30 years. So what should we prioritize as drivers of the master plan? And so these 7 design drivers emerged from all this data. And so you see them on the screen here. The notion of starting with students, a student-centered mindset. Inspiration, we don't want to just do the baseline, we want to create awe-inspiring spaces for learners across the district. Community, knowing that people are welcomed and included in this community and that they feel safe and comfortable in school, and their families feel safe and comfortable in school. The notion of collaboration being more important than ever in schools to provide the best experiences for all learners. Resilience, so not just fixing what's broken and then letting it break again, but creating systems that can be easily repaired and that allow the district to function at a higher efficiency. The notion of wellness, so beyond academic performance, also just human performance. How do we make sure buildings support the well-being of its inhabitants? And then, of course, safety, ensuring that every building is secure and safe. So these become the major drivers that the design team and the architects and in collaboration with Dearborn will look at as the final scenarios for a master plan take shape. So we are here tonight to start that conversation of, is this in alignment with what you are hearing or what you are feeling, and get some feedback around that in a little bit. So what do we do with this? We're going to take what we learned, all this information and these design drivers, and then we'll start thinking about what does this look like in terms of the physical environment. So how do buildings how they may need to change or shift or adapt in order to support this vision. And then another thing that also needs to support that is, what does the actual teaching and learning look like? If you're thinking about spaces that support this wider range of experience, what needs to actually occur in the classroom to use those spaces well? And so the master plan is very much focusing on what does this look like in the facilities, but on the side, the work that we've done with Dearborn so far has kind of surfaced lots of opportunities and excitement about that teaching and learning side of things as well. And so that's a great opportunity. So before I go any further, just want to pause real quick, and I'm going to hand it over to Janet in a moment, but we just kind of downloaded a lot of information, and so I just want to pause and see if any folks in the room have questions, or if there are any, David, questions coming in from your side of the room. Nothing so far from David's side, so happy to answer questions, yeah. And I'm going to bring this microphone up, so if you have a question, we can say it. If people are watching online, they can hear you.
So, in addition to the information you gathered, have you gathered information about students' demographic, investments in facilities that have been done over the years? And it's not just
So have we also collected prior investments and then just the demographic distribution of the students? Okay, I'm going to hand that to Jessie. She is the master architect. She has dealt with more of the data, so I'll let her respond to that.
Thanks for the question. So we have the history of all the facilities for Dearborn, so we have all of that collected, and we know that, and we've logged that, so that's part of all of the analysis that we've been doing. And in terms of the demographic study, we have a demographic study that's been done, and so that's all collected, and that'll be distributed later, so that's part of the process.
Thank you. I'm asking that question because one of your goals here is equitable access for opportunity for all students. And I want here to challenge that a bit. So let me ask you, you know the city is divided, geographically is divided. There is an east end and west end, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the schools gets invested over $100 million or about $100 million in HV systems, right? 6% of that went to the east side of the city, while about 60% went to the west side. And there's some for administrative and central things. So when we talk about equitable access to schools, we need to mean that. It's not just coming here, doing this presentation and walking away without understanding what has the history of this district is. There's a history of unequitable access to opportunities and resources. And you have to understand that going to your planning. And I hope you learned that from you know, how the demographic, but also how's the schools and their how they do in their you know, in their tests and outcomes of different schools. So there has been, and also that tied to a lot of students here don't have spaces that are community. They don't have schools that are community schools. There's a lot of students that get bused to different spaces, and that create them, you know, limited their sense of community schools and limited their opportunity to access a lot of these opportunities because they don't stay after school programs. So I would like you to think about that as you go if you're planning and collecting the data, because it's not equitable, as although the administration or the district will try to show. The real data, just take the numbers from their website, this chart that is on their website that they just did right now, completed, and do it east versus west, and you'll see where it's equitable access meant for them. Where all these buildings, most of them are same age, there may be variants, although the east side, you can argue, is more older, need more validations than some of in the west side, but the money went somewhere. The city itself has a history of that. We just went through a flood a couple of years ago, and it was obvious where the investments went and where parts of the city was left to be drowned. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, thanks so much for that comment. It's really helpful. I guess so just to respond to two parts of that, and then we'll keep going. So in terms of the investments of HVAC, et cetera, and all of the systems, again, I really appreciate that. And what we're doing is we're looking now where things stand and then looking towards the future. So we're looking at what the needs are of all of the systems and quantifying that in terms of dollars, and then dollars against what the replacement value would be for the systems and the building. And we're assessing that across the district. So just not looking at where they're located and not looking at where they're located. So completely blind in terms of what that is. And then in terms of resources, I'm really happy that you brought that up, because we want to understand what the needs and wants are for the community in terms of just that, and how you would want to use those in the future and what those opportunities are. So we're going to get into that later on in just a few minutes.
Any other just pressing questions kind of related to some of the context that we offered? Appreciate your comments before we pass it on to Janet. All right, thank you. Yep.
Okay, so we paused to sort of look at the big picture, and now I'm going to bring it back to space and how can we use space and what that might look like. Mike, do you have the clicker?
Yes, sorry.
So just to get our minds thinking about space and how we can use it, what is the ideal place to practice basketball? Where would you want to practice basketball? What do you need? A gym. There we go. What is the ideal space to learn to read? A reading center. So then we've identified, or you as a community have identified, your priorities for the future. What are the ideal environments to practice those complex problem-solving skills and emotional intelligence? Well, that's what we're here to explore today. So I'm going to give you some examples of what space can look like to address some of these different competencies and affordances that you might see students pursuing in school. So for example, an opportunity where students could meet one-on-one with each other or one-on-one with an adult. Areas to work together. Areas to build trust and relationships. Multiple ways to learn or practice in new and meaningful contexts, personalized options, places to build and invent. So we provided earlier in November when we came to visit a bunch of different patterns. So a pattern is a simple sketch that shows how a space can work. And then we also showed those patterns next to examples or photographs of what a space could look like. And we put up a bunch, like 30 or 40. And with each group that came to visit, we asked them to use their perspective and explore the pattern and explore the photographs and to mark down with a dot which pattern or photograph spoke the most to them. So you can see right here, community members looking at these patterns and putting up these sticky dots.
I could just add, not only what spoke to them, but what would support their vision and some of the research around the future of learning, the things that they know are going to be important, and things that we help them kind of explore in terms of how teaching and learning is evolving from historic versions of teaching and learning to the direction that it's going.
So you can see the 6 different groups that we met with, and we actually met with them multiple times, so there were many people that came. So we have, and those are in the colored circles at the top, so PTA, special ed, elementary, ELD, middle school, and high school. And then you can see all of the dots here for their top 5 patterns. And so we have the top 5 patterns overall: STEAM workshop, learning community, calming retreat, learning suite, and small group room. And then you can see the distribution of the dots on the bottom. So to dive into this a little bit deeper, this is broken down by each of those groups and their top 3. So as Mike was saying, everyone was entering this with their own perspective and trying to think about what spaces would really help them in teaching and meet the needs of their students. And so you could see there is a fair bit of variation up here, but then there are also some commonalities. So with the PTA, we have STEAM workshop, learning suites, outdoor classrooms. In special ed, small group rooms, health, fitness, and wellness, calming retreats. In elementary, calming retreats, indoor-outdoor connections, and STEAM workshops. In ELD, learning communities, small group room, transparency. In middle school, STEAM workshops, casual eating areas, calming retreats. And then finally, high school, learning communities, teacher collaboration rooms, and daylight, so natural lighting. So we want to get your feedback on these patterns. So tonight we have posted a selection of patterns with photograph examples as well, but these now have been curated based on all of the community feedback that we've already received. So this is coming from those top 5 or those top 3 in all these different groups. So we want to give you the opportunity to look at them and explore them. And as you're back there, we want you to think about 2 things. What's really exciting to you? And then what questions do you might have? So we have a bunch of Post-it notes and Sharpies up here, and then along the back wall of the auditorium are all of the different patterns with the examples. And so take some time, we'll give you about 10 minutes to really look and explore, and on each individual sticky note you can write your questions and then things that you're excited about. Before you come and sit back down, there are 2 big posters on the back. One for questions and one for excitements. So once you've written on your sticky notes, you can actually just leave them back there. And then we'll come back and have a discussion as a group on what these images sparked.
How long?
10 minutes.
Thank you.
10 minutes. Thank you. You've got about 2 minutes to finish exploring the different patterns and photos. Make sure that you do place your sticky notes on the 2 big posters back there, and then you can start to make your way back to your seats. If you could place your sticky notes on the posters and then make your way back here, bring your questions in your mind, bring your excitements. We can have a discussion and sort of bring up some of these ideas or questions that you may have. We want to provide you with as many opportunities as possible to answer your questions. So come on back and we'll dive into those questions. Respectful of time, so I want to jump right in. Are there any questions that you want to bring up right now, or things that you're excited to share? Yes. You raising your hand? Just getting comfortable. That's important too. Thank you, Zach. So yes, you're welcome to share the question you have up there. That'd be great.
Okay, so one of the pictures was like a eating area, or what is it? A casual eating area. So I was asking you, I'm like, so how would that work at our school at Lori? Because our cafeteria is in like the basement. So our eating area, cafeteria is in the basement. So how would that work? Like, if we're not gonna tear down the whole school, how would that work? Like, can we use that space for maybe something else, and then maybe have a cafeteria upstairs instead of downstairs? Is that like an option that we might have?
So right now, we're exploring all options, and we're here to get your feedback on what you're excited about or maybe what you're concerned about. And everything can be on the table. So yes, we could be looking at a renovation where you can move it. There's all sorts of options. But to address the needs that we were discussing, having a cafeteria in the basement where there's no ventilation and no daylight, that doesn't meet your baseline needs. And that's even those need to be addressed before we can even jump into your exciting vision that you've established. So yes, that is a great example of changes absolutely need to be made. And so when we're thinking about designing for the future and looking at the buildings, then yes, that would need to be changed and addressed. Absolutely. I promise we'll have lots of more opportunities for questions. Yes.
A couple questions. One, there is outside space for to use, and I was sharing with one of your colleagues that it's exciting to see that we have an opportunity for outside space, just to make sure we're in Michigan and how to use that data center, how it can be designed and accessible. Second, my question was how to make sure that facilities, especially that designed for gym and workout and things like that, can be accessible to communities after hours without incurring a lot of costs.
Great questions. So in terms of an outside space, you mentioned accessibility. So that's absolutely something that's really important, that we, as we're designing these spaces, to be accessible for everyone. And in terms of thinking about, we're in Michigan right now. It's February. It's actually a very warm February day, so today's not a good example. But, or maybe it is. So these are spaces that you can use throughout the seasons, and something that can be thinking about with the curriculum is how to incorporate it into the learning and make sure that students and the culture of the school is excited about using that in all seasons. There are also things that we can do to make the spaces warmer and maybe a little bit more comfortable even though they're outside. Or there's other spaces that bring in outside to maybe a more inside space. So whether that's an atrium or a greenhouse. But there's lots of interesting sort of indoor-outdoor connections that can be achieved in Michigan any time of the year. And then your second question. Remind me.
Accessible to facilities in terms of like gym and after-school activities.
Yes, after-school So we're going to dive into that topic in just a little bit. So I'm going to put a pin in that because we're absolutely going to talk about that. All right, I'm going to move on to the next section where we are going to talk. Actually, that's perfect segue. So Zach's going to talk a little bit more about resources.
Thank you, Janet. Yeah, I think that was the perfect segue. It's come up multiple times now of these community resources and how are they distributed, or how can they be distributed through the community to ensure all students have equitable access. So we want to get a discussion going here about, thinking of if we're going to start looking at changes and touches to buildings throughout the community. These buildings have valuable facility resources that can start to be used after hours, after school hours for the community members. So I guess when we're talking about community resources, for example, a competitive swimming pool, a gymnasium, a STEM tech maker lab, or even like a media center, considering how those can start to function for the school hours and also after school hours. And so first we just kind of want to like pick your brain, like what facility resources are you currently using? And we're not going to make you get up again, but if you just want to kind of call out, if you can think of like your day-to-day life. Are you going to sports events, or what kind of after-school resources are you using? Yes, from the schools. Tutoring programs, sports events. The pools as well. Football fields, sporting, yep. Playgrounds can function as parks after school potentially. Auditoriums. Sorry? Tracks, track and field, absolutely. So, yeah, if you keep them coming, I guess if you have more, this is great. Rent out classrooms.
Who are you renting classrooms to? Or is Okay, so adult and education and 21st century programs. So programs, and are those a part of Dearborn Public Schools, or are those separate from Dearborn Public Schools? Okay. Great. All right. So within and external groups using the classrooms and other learning spaces. Okay. Arabic school.
So there are specialized classrooms for language acquisition after school? But, okay, so even regular classrooms are being utilized after hours. Yeah, student clubs, that's another great, so a lot of great after-school resources. And so that kind of segues into, well, what facility resources would you like to be, would you and your family like to be using? What are you excited about? Like what, you mentioned all these great resources, but is there anything else? And I can go back to this page.
I didn't know school facilities were accessible to the general public at all.
Okay.
Is this a wish?
So for the people online, sure.
You actually can. You have to put in a permit, and there is a fee, but you have to go through the Board of Education to get a permit.
This makes it sound like anybody can walk in and do anything they want.
So there was a question and clarification for people online that there was a misunderstanding that facility resources could whether or not they could be used after school, and in fact they can be. So that's why we're kind of talking about this, to bring awareness to it and get your thoughts on it, and also, you know, for this 30-year master plan and moving forward, now taking advantage of this. Totally. Yes, completely. There are barriers. Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, so just, again, feedback for those online. The commentary is that there are facilities can be utilized, but there is a prohibitive cost to some of those experiences because of the requirements of staffing that require the school to operate these environments after school hours. And that makes it prohibitive and challenging to open these spaces for community use. So one of the things that is important to think about in a 25 to 30 year time frame is that there are many communities around the United States, just many very similar to Dearborn, that have worked through partnerships and opportunities to expand access to community resources at either a much lower fiscal cost or in many cases no cost. Whether it's through a funding proposal or a community bond or millage initiative, operating opportunities, or partnerships. So partnerships with municipal agencies, partnerships with nonprofits, partnerships with other local groups. And so one of the things that we hope for you to consider and think about are the experiences that you aspire to have in Dearborn that are not currently accessible. What would that community experience look like and feel like? That would make you proud to be a member of this community. Because that's really what we want to aim for. We don't want to aim for the bare minimum. We want to aim for something that's exceptional.
Right. So dream big. If you could have anything.
So we were in a workshop earlier today, so I'll just give some other examples of things that surfaced, and that can be helpful in kind of brainstorming what might really resonate with you. A group of people recommended that they thought it would be very exciting if Dearborn had the ability to provide more early childhood care. as part of the overall community experience, because that builds community in a much earlier phase. And they thought that, the opportunity to establish something like that would be actually very beneficial, not just for the students, but also for the community at large. And then from that conversation, somebody else said, yes, and it would be amazing if there were opportunities for elder experiences. So or places where people could come who are looking for activities and opportunities to stay active or to stay engaged, potentially with young people or potentially in concentrated programs. So using those as two examples, what I would like you to do just for a moment is just turn and talk to somebody in the room and share just a couple of things that you would love, disregard for a moment, suspend a little bit of reality and say, what could be amazing? What would be the things that would just make this a really special place to live? Share that with your neighbor, just one or two ideas, and then we'll come back out and get a couple more, and then we'll kind of move to the next question. All right? So just take 3 minutes to do that. Go ahead.
Hands-on class?
A lot of cosmetic changes, seating outside, seating inside.
No, this is all, it's all functional. Like, when we talk about learning communities, small group rooms, learning commons, like these are, we're forming the spaces to align with the vision for teaching and learning.
In Dearborn,
Yeah.
we have a lot of coffee houses, a lot of places, or like our high school students can go and do an experience, stuff like that. What we need more of is hands-on classrooms, like a biology room, up-to-date chemistry room for our students.
Are you talking for after?
No, during and after.
Okay. Yeah, so,
We need stuff like that because we have
Totally.
second language learners. And we have low-income families that don't get a chance to experience what other kids can experience.
yeah,
We need to bring those experiences into our buildings.
yeah. And so that might be a great opportunity for,
Biology, chemistry lab.
that's for both, you're saying, during school hours and
That
after
there's
school hours?
uses where the kids can come in and use these labs.
Sure.
If they have, because we have a program in Dearborn schools where kids can take college while they're in high school.
Yeah.
So my daughter's taking one of those classes, and she can do her associate's degree 1 year after graduation.
Oh,
So
that's
she has
amazing.
chemistry labs. So
Right,
when they go to the college, it's very limited.
yeah.
They need rooms to go, they can practice and work on and stuff, but we don't have that in Dearborn. And we need a lot more hands-on. Our second language learners learn more by hands-on,
Absolutely.
more than anything. And that's a big population for us here in Dearborn.
So when I see like the open space design and not rows of desks, me, I envision that as students being able to engage more than sit and get. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you're saying with
So,
the
like,
open space. I love the idea of the open
Yeah,
space.
you're saying in
But
addition to that.
in
It's
addition
not-
to the
yeah.
open space, they need to have the structure, everything needs to be in that room, and it needs to be up to date. Our chemistry rooms, our stuff here are outdated.
Yeah.
They're
And that's,
totally outdated.
For sure.
Our kids are not getting the experience. Once they leave our buildings here, we're setting them up for college. Once they get to college, my daughter was in awe. She was taking pictures of her lab. It was like, we have none of this.
Right.
Right.
This is
Yeah,
stuff our
that's a
kids
good
really
example.
All right,
need.
so I wrote that down. What else? What else are sort of like dreams? What do we want?
And I didn't hear anything about security-wise with structure. Like Fortson, coming through both doors, the main doors, you have to walk a while before you get to the main office. Our offices are brick walls. There's no windows for us as secretaries or staff members. We cannot see who's coming into our building.
right. And that's where the slide that we kind of started
Think
with,
about the safety in the windows inside the buildings. The security part needs to be a part of this.
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, and that's what one of the design drivers, one of the key, drivers of that's pushing the design forward at every decision we make is safety. And so we can't get into that kind of nitty-gritty right at this presentation because we kind of already engaged you guys on the future of teaching and learning. That's when that came out. We started to get more into like the layouts, safe environment, transparency.
But that's absolutely part of the plan is to increase transparency.
Plays a big role in the learning.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to take that pause in conversation to bring us back. Should we, were there any ideas that anybody would like to just share out? With the rest of the group, we had some kind of individual conversations, but any concepts that you think like to share out for the whole group to hear?
I would like to see more hands-on classrooms.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to see more hands-on classrooms. Our biology rooms, our chemistry rooms are very outdated. With the collaboration, like with Fortson and HFCC, our students are leaving here and going to HFCC, going into their labs. They're in awe at HFCC because we don't have that stuff here. And we need to remember our students, most of our students are second language learners. They learn more by hands-on experiences than they do through textbook, because there's that language barrier. We need to remember that. And I also brought up security. I didn't say anything about security. Some of our buildings in our main offices are way far, like Fortson. I work at Oakman. We're not right off the door. We don't have the glass to see as parents walk in, walk out. There's times parents will come in and walk into a classroom. That's a big security reason for us that we do need windows. We need to be able to see out of the main office into the hallways what's going on, because it's when it gets to the education part, when parents are opening the doors, interrupting our teachers while we're teaching, that's a main part we also need to, other than security. We need those windows.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments. And I believe we addressed those in the baseline needs when we said, safety is a high priority, and that's a key design driver. There's only, 6 or 7 design drivers, and one of them is safety, because that is an absolute focus driving the design moving forward at every point. So thank you for your comments.
Any other community resources or facility opportunities that you'd be really excited to see in just kind of incorporated into the master plan at a district level?
This afternoon it was mentioned, and you mentioned it tonight, about having more opportunities to provide trades, opportunities for the kids and spaces for the trade skills.
Excellent, thank you. And I could imagine seeing how those types of environments could extend to some great learning experiences during and after school too, just because they're flexible environments and could engage both young learners and adult learners potentially. So, thank you. Okay, we have one more question. Well, actually, we have a couple more questions, but we have another question. Go ahead.
And that's actually a perfect segue into our next question, which is about post-secondary pathways and career prep, which has now come up, a number of times. So what excitements or concerns would you have if more facilities were designed to support specialized career and post-secondary pathways? So this is hitting on exactly what you're talking about. Whether you're thinking of biology labs you mentioned, or this could be robotics, robotic shops or medical programs. This could be your skilled trades. What excitements or concerns would you have if more facilities were being designed to support specialized career and post-secondary pathways? So you have these buildings. We know that a few of them, more than a few of them, could use some work. There's a give and take here. So I guess to kind of pick your brain on, what challenges or what are you excited about, and then what is the kind of challenge that comes along with providing that. That's what we're trying to get. So if you just want to call them out, and we can kind of write them out over there and collect your voice, let your voice be heard.
So are we talking about having them in the same building or building another building in addition?
At this point of the planning process, that hasn't been determined. So if you have an opinion on saying, hey, I would love to have a specialized space where all of this was concentrated, that'd be great to know. Or if your opinion would be, I'd love to see this distributed to all of our learners throughout the district, we'd love to know that too. So do you have a recommendation or a thought that you've had related to that?
I would like to see another building, because we already have Michael Berry, but it can only house a certain amount of kids at Michael Berry. And my kids have really took it and flew with it. And I think a lot of students can can gain more out of their adulthood going through these classes. So maybe building another building and helping the schools also alleviate some of their numbers in the buildings.
So the idea would be some dedicated spaces for that type of career pathway, or other potentially pathways. The idea of doing that might create some space and help students have kind of a concentrated experience related to those interests that they might have. And you would be excited to see something like that, if I'm summarizing in the right way.
I wanted to build on to what Michael Berry's doing right now for our
Okay.
students. Just build onto it, make it bigger so more of our students have a chance to be involved.
Great. We did hear from some other community members that the excitement around this particular topic is important in the district, and providing more access to these types of things seem to be important. And so we're looking for other insights related to that. Any other thoughts on this one? Here.
For the idea for the Michael Berry's, so we have students that actually go, they have like the early college or they take college classes. So why not have for like maybe other colleges or maybe other like institutes that can take some of our students, just like Henry Ford does, and like, you know, like the skill trades for the kids that want to have like just, you know, yeah, just the experience, but like at different, just like Henry Ford has it. And I know now Wayne State is, you know, takes, you know, a lot of our kids are taking, you know, college courses. So why not have that, like, have other careers at other, you know what I mean, facilities?
We have to remember transportation is a problem for our parents.
Yeah, so it's a great insight, though. So certainly with any, as Zach kind of mentioned, with any decision, there are always operational and logistical things to overcome. But that's the great part of master planning, is you can start preparing for those long-term opportunities. So just to summarize, to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, finding more pathways like that you think would be a great opportunity for your students and for this community, not just necessarily trades, but other types of careers, whether it's design or architecture or education even, early enrollment, dual enrollment opportunities, see that as being beneficial to your students. Okay, here we go.
So as we plan for the infrastructure, I think we also need to look at the next 30 years, maybe minimum, where the job market is, to come up with what we need. So if we take into consideration, I do a lot of research on this, and we look at artificial intelligence, it's going to change the job market drastically. And so the trades, from what I'm reading, is going to be a big deal, you know, because it's hard for artificial intelligence to really take over the trades. So if you look at our welding and wood classes and auto, we definitely need a more modern facility to accommodate that, look at electric vehicles, and just be prepared for the future. So as we look at infrastructure, let's look at the job market of the future.
I appreciate that insight and comment, and I think that's certainly really important. And it also emphasizes the fact that it's nearly impossible to prepare and know exactly what's happening in 30 years. And so that, going back to those notions of flexible and agile and variable environments, becomes really important when you're planning a facilities master plan. So creating spaces that can accommodate a huge range of opportunities so that it can adapt and pivot to whatever's most important. Any other comments related on this before we go to our last activity? Yes, here you go.
They need to be accessible to all students and across the city. So AD has to think about not just one building, but how can these be distributed where even now college students can be taken at Fortson. There are high school like in Detroit that host college classes that still, because of the size of our schools, they can host those classes. Students don't need to drive because some students can't drive. Right now, there's even, it's not just in high schools, but even middle schools. We have a STEM middle school, which is, districts don't provide transportation. So if your parents can't transport, you lose your opportunity to get to that space. So how do we think about not just one space to serve, but how spaces are distributed across the district?
Thanks, and I think that's, again, speaking to this notion of equity, ensuring that any decision that's made is equitably accessible to every student in the district.
Just to piggyback on what Dr. Mosip said, yeah, letting all students have the opportunity to explore all their options before committing to a program that might be off-site would be an equitable opportunity for all of them. So keeping things less centralized and distributed equally would allow for all kids to have all these opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And also, the opposite side of that, starting to consolidate, would kind of lend itself to the economy of scale. So if it was all consolidated in one area, you can kind of become more elaborate, and the facilities can become. Sorry. There's benefits to both. So this is why we're kind of bringing up this discussion to how would you see it best distributed, or what do you see, as a barrier to this, or an opportunity. Keep moving along. And so now I will pass this off to Jesse, I believe.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, so we have a facility master plan to work out, and so how do we do that? Where do we begin? Well, we began with teaching and learning and what that might look like. And so we've talked a lot about that to date in terms of what that vision is. And so after that, we think about a data-driven approach, and that's really where we start assessing, again, that scope of projects and the prioritization. What are those needs across the district? And so to do that, we are looking at 3 main metrics to begin. And so those 3 main metrics are in what you can kind of tell is in this gray box. So we have the Facility Condition Index. And what that is it's an industry standard, and it's really an equation of the deferred maintenance and repairs, so that's a cost, there's a number associated with that, over the current replacement value of a building. And so that's a number that we get, and there's a score associated with that, it's a percentage. And then we have what we're calling an adaptability assessment. And so we've walked all of the school buildings, and based on the vision for the future of learning, and a lot of these spaces that you've seen, along the back of the room, we've assessed how easy or difficult it would be to adapt the existing buildings to what that vision for the future of learning could look like. And so that's based on a number of things, including the floor plan, the building layout, the structure, the materials that the building's made of, and the safety. So as was mentioned earlier, the proximity of the vestibule, the secure vestibule, and transparency to make sure that we can see and understand who's entering and exiting the building. And then utilization. So we also talked about the enrollment projections that we did, so we understand the numbers. So the enrollment over the capacity of the building. So how many people are projected to be in each building over the next 10 years, over how many students can fit into a building, right? So we understand the needs of each building as well in terms of what those numbers are. So we can look at a district level and understand, again, the needs for each building in terms of really a priority, and then the scope of what projects makes the most sense. And so then there are other elements that are a little bit more nuanced. So this idea of historic significance that you see to the right. We're in this incredible building, right? Fortson's in a beautiful, historic building that's, let's face it, it's not going anywhere, but what makes the most sense to use this building, we're not sure. But we want to talk to you now and have this more nuanced conversation about the idea and balance of tradition and innovation. So I'm going to hand it to Janet.
Okay, so what do we know? We know that Dearborn school facilities have abundant needs. So a lot of you have already mentioned that this evening. Like, oh, the bathrooms are leaking, or the HVAC is struggling. And then we even at the beginning of this presentation tonight listed a baseline of needs, and it's a substantial list. So we know that there are many facilities in Dearborn's district that have these needs. And there are 11 buildings that are going to reach 100 this decade. That's really exciting. These are stunning buildings, but it's also old. It's impressive. We also know that Dearborn's vision for the future of learning is not currently aligned with the facilities or resources. So we've talked about this exciting vision that Dearborn citizens have come up with, and they're excited about innovation, but we know that a lot of the spaces that are required to carry out that vision aren't able to be in the buildings as they are at this moment. So with these two pieces, we know that change needs to happen. Change needs to happen no matter what, because you've already identified with the problems with the HVAC and the leaking ceiling. So we know that change needs to happen. Can you do the next slide? Thank you. So this is the question that we're posing. Imagine a future where Dearborn is the source of the most innovative and well-prepared leaders, citizens, family members, and students in Michigan. How do we get there? So we have this spectrum up here, and it's really a spectrum of change. And on one side, we have leaning into a tradition of innovation and transformation, so a high appetite for change. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have building on a strong foundation for success, so preservation and legacy. I want to emphasize that this is a spectrum, and these are the two extremes. I want to see where you, as individuals, as community members who are forward thinkers and are thinking about the future, how do we marry these two ideas? Where do you fall along the spectrum? Where do you think we should go on the spectrum? And we really want your opinion, and there is no wrong answer. So we actually have this spectrum replicated over there on the wall. And before you leave tonight, I want you to take one of the sticky notes that are either up here, or maybe you even have some already, and I want you to place your opinion on that spectrum of where you feel Dearborn should go in terms of change. Should you be more on the strong foundation for success, preservation, and legacy, or more on this end, lean into a tradition of innovation and transformation, so leaning into change? And again, you can put your sticky note anywhere on the spectrum. It doesn't have to be on either end, but it could be on either end.
If you are online, we have this categorized. So tradition, innovation, transformation, at the farthest end would be a 0, and building on a strong foundation for success, preservation, and legacy would be a 20, or somewhere in between. All right? And so if you want online to just add a 0 through a 20 where you think this might want to land on the spectrum. And I just want to recognize the number 0 doesn't necessarily mean like less good, right? And a 20 doesn't mean better. It's just a way to signify some mark on this spectrum. So feel free to add that online if you are participating online.
We do have a few more minutes though, and I do want to pose this question sort of to the group of how do you feel about change? So if you do want to comment, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the why, where you feel Dearborn should be on that spectrum, and why you feel that way. Great question. So as Mike said, the numbers, it's not increasing like this is the high or this is the low. It's just to give you sort of a line. So 20 on that spectrum over there, and it's written as well, is build on a strong foundation for success. So preservation and legacy, that's less change. Less change. So on the left-hand side, lean into a tradition of innovation and transformation. Currently that's 0, but that's a high appetite for change. Yeah, go for it. And then if you want to comment too, we'd love to hear your voice. If you're like, I feel this way, I'm smack dab in the middle and this is why, or I really feel like we need to preserve legacy and why, or I'm excited for change, let's go all the way.
high coherence is what we call that.
It is a little hard without knowing, where the buildings stand.
So one of the comments was, it's a little hard to know exactly where to put my sticky note on this line without knowing exactly where the buildings stand. Like, what are the conditions of each of the buildings? It makes it very, very difficult to make a decision. Recognize that that is the exact same difficulty that the district will have and that we will have in recommending a master plan, right? There's no clear-cut way to make a very specific choice about what changes and what's preserved. It's almost impossible. So that's why we're using a data-informed process, that facility condition index and the adaptability score and the utilization, to give us a really solid baseline of how you make these decisions. And hopefully that will allow the district to make good choices that are informed by numbers and can remove some of those, I guess, qualitative or maybe potentially less equitable decisions from how the master plan develops. That being said, there are beautiful buildings like this that certainly need some changes, but we wouldn't recommend necessarily removing this building from Dearborn, right? That would not necessarily be a great choice. So that appetite for change might help us think about different ways to use different resources in the district. Are there any other just comments that folks would want to make? Why you placed your sticky note where it is? For people that are online, I just want to call out that almost all of the sticky notes that people put on this line are around 5 and trending a little bit towards 6 and 7, but they're above 10, or they're from 10 to 0, which means more of an appetite for change and less of an appetite for just preservation and legacy. But that also means there are some really important legacy things that we need to preserve, right? So to not just forget about it and throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That's right. And actually a comment I just received from a participant was about repurposing, where a building may no longer make sense as a school, but what other purposes may it find? So I thought that was a valid comment. Do you have a?
I'd like to make a comment that perhaps has nothing to do with any of your questions. Is that okay? I guess
now is the perfect time for comments that have nothing to do with any of our questions.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
I understand all your jargon and the meaning of it. But let me tell you what I think based on what I saw. I saw 12 or 13 diagrams back there. I think there were that many. I didn't count them. There was all of them interesting, made sense, probably with the exception of 2 or 3 for me. Your calming retreat, I guess that I don't see that in any public school, and maybe in a hospital someplace. But the neighborhood school, I don't understand how you could even do that. Certainly not in this weather. So obviously you have an expertise in looking at how to educate people in the future, new forms, new systems, and that's why you were hired. To think this amount of people, if this happened in 3 other places, is going to give you direction, I don't think so. This young lady that works in the schools, and people that work in the schools can tell you their problems. I thought we were going to see some sort of master plan about the 37 buildings. Now, Dearborn is the 3rd largest system in Michigan. It has a $400 million budget, which is stupendous. Being an architect myself and planning cities and major hospitals, I would think most of our buildings are not suitable for those diagrams. You'd have to gut all these buildings, and you will run across code violations, fire emergency, this, and that's why they lock all the doors in the school so nobody can get in, but also prevents people from getting out. So I wasn't quite sure what I expected this to be? You obviously have an expertise. The major problem is if 11 are 100 years old, even the ones that aren't 100, they're interesting. They'd all have, in order to look like your diagrams, they'd have to be gutted or replaced. And this is a platinum system. I've always said that. This is the richest system, probably the best, even though it always cries for more money. When they lose an election, the system always comes back until regular people get tired and the bond issues get elected. That's my impression. I think you know what you're talking about, or you've done some analysis with how people should be taught at different levels, but how that works in existing 37 buildings, you're not going to find the answer with 15 people. That's the answer you have to do by taking a program for every building, for whether it's K through 12 or just elementary and only high school, and even vocational. I didn't even know what that term STEAM meant till I got invited to a charter school that was a private school. I sent my daughter, and they actually put the A in STEAM, and I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And it stands for art, as I understand it. But I've learned something about that, everybody working in one room together. Anyway, I talk too much, but I don't know how you develop. You obviously have an expertise to take a building program for schooling and make sense out of it, but none of our buildings will allow you to do that, I don't think. And I've never been in this one before, and I'm anxious to see it.
So we'll pass that back to Jesse, and I'll say that. So one of the fun parts of our job is this kind of interplay between education and architecture, right? And what I'll thank you for your yes, your observation is yep, no, both helpful and critical, which is very important. One, we cannot make all of these decisions without community engagement, right? It's important that the community is a part of this work. And so that is heard, and our hope is that there will continue to be more community engagement as ideas narrow down to a final master plan. So that is certainly, we agree with you, right? We can't make this decision with small groups of people. We need to make sure that a large group of people is engaged. And then as it relates to transforming existing facilities into some of those types of spaces, there are many precedents, both in the United States and around the world, where those things are possible. And it doesn't mean that every building will be full sail transformed. It means adding some features and opportunities in some of these buildings.
Mechanical
Yep.
systems are tremendously important.
Yes. Yep. So the mechanical, plumbing, HVAC, those are incredibly important. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll let Jessie respond to that portion of it, because that's her area of expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for your comments, and Mike, you really did sum it up. The only thing I can really add or elaborate on is, yes, so the community engagement piece is huge, and so there won't be a one-size-fits-all. So the master plan approach and solution will most likely include a wide scale of interventions. In terms of the spaces that you saw and the patterns that you saw posted, those have been applied in terms of renovation and new construction. So again, at really various scales of modifications and interventions, and they can be achieved in all sorts of ways. And so we're really excited, and we do see opportunities to be able to implement those in Dearborn in all of the buildings. And we see the master plan most likely ending up in a mixture of renovation at small, large scale, and new construction. But coming here tonight and then yesterday in those engagements was an opportunity to talk to you and then hopefully talk to more people, and including the people that we talked to in the fall, to get your input to help shape what the community looks like in the future, because this is a big deal. We're at a really exciting point in the process to shape the next 30 years and a huge investment, to your point, moving forward. So thank you for being here and for asking the questions and participating.
Any other questions from the group? Okay. We'll do the comment and then we'll go to the question. Yep.
My comment is, I have 7 students that go to this building alone that I trust to Dearborn Public Schools, and I have one in middle school. Dearborn Public Schools is doing a great job by giving our kids the opportunities they need, but we would like to see them grow so every child in the district is able to get them. That's the understanding I want you guys to really know. The mechanic shops, from going to the college classes, CIS classes. I have 7 of them in this building. Each one has spread their wings in a different area. I would just like to see these programs also built into other buildings, and what they have in their buildings built into our buildings, so our kids here also would have the same opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate that comment.
Yeah, ask those indexes, the FCI and adaptivity, and will those indexes will be published for schools, for individual schools and buildings?
Yes, we imagine that those will be published in the future.
So you're talking about what?
The different metrics, the data, yep. All of that is currently being processed. It's a work in progress, but we are working with the district to make that available when it's ready. Not yet, but soon. The timeline for the overall master plan is sometime late spring, so obviously before then.
And then from now until spring, you guys are gonna, like, it's not only us, like, you guys are gonna, like, reach out to other community members, or this is it, how does it work?
Great question. We hope to talk with other people, so we're obviously here yesterday and today. We're talking with more people tomorrow, and we'll talk with leadership to see how we can continue to engage.
And I'll just say, to speak on, not on behalf of the district, but we see this is clearly a partnership. The district did communicate fairly extensively to encourage people to come to these engagements. And so we are hopeful that people that are here will encourage, at the next opportunity, to encourage more people to come.
And I just hope that the district does, when they do want to reach out to the parents, or they want to send out those surveys, I hope that they do this, because I know I've been receiving a lot of emails. It's all over Facebook, all over social media. So when it does come the time where they do need the parents or the community members' input, I hope the district will do a good job in even wording like what the survey is about, not just sending out a survey or having, like, for example, I have a 7th grade daughter. You know, her language arts teacher can just give her a survey, but, you know, and it might be worded in a way where my daughter's not really going to care about it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So that's something.
Great. We appreciate that feedback. So ensuring that the explanation and the importance of that is emphasized in future communications.
Also in, like, in other languages too, because not all of our parents are,
Yep, we're working for translations as well.
There has been so many, at least 2 major look at facilities like come together and failed. The community doesn't buy any of that. It's just like we're wasting our time here coming in into 2 hours talking all day. At the end of the day, when the district want to invest their money, they'll use it. They just spend $100 million and we didn't even had a say on it. They took it, they invested, it's gone. So for us, I'm just telling you, I mean, a lot of community will be like, what's the point? We've done this 3-4 times. There's no result. What's the point of coming here?
So can I ask you a genuine question? Yes. So since this is our first time engaging with you, what can we do to help engage you in a different way, in a meaningful way, to make this work, to make this process work for you?
I'm not saying it's you. I think you're representing the district.
Right, right.
The district has a history of going back and forth with the community on these issues and failing the community in some ways that now the trust is lost. And no matter how times you're going to come, they put up a bond one time, it failed. They put a really hard money earned that spent tomorrow, they don't ask us. We didn't get community town halls to see how we're going to spend this $100 million. They just took it, they had a plan, they implemented it, they went with it. And the community is, we just learning how it's spent now and where the huge, really huge, inequitable way of treating buildings. A building like Salina, that's next to all the factories, got $25,000 out of $100 million. Can you imagine? And I asked the principal, is your building fully air conditioned? No. So how can you you don't do a building like this, justice, while you're going all over the district and doing air conditioning all over the district, but not in these sections? So I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
not you. I hope you don't take it personally.
No, it's a,
I'm just saying, I mean, there was so many call for these meetings. I think it's just the community has lost trust in engaging with the district, especially in this area. It's just, the building will be the buildings, we're just not gonna.
Yeah,
And also, we live in a very high tax city, one of the highest tax city. So people are not willing to put up more money for taxes to invest in schools. They're like,
Yeah, it's an extremely complicated and challenging situation, right? If once trust has been lost. One of the things that will be important, and I would love to talk to you or anyone here, and we do want to close this down because we want people to feel welcome to leave and people to sign off. I think everybody in this room is probably here because in some way, shape, or form, you care about the condition and experience that kids have in these schools, right? That is something that will unify everybody in this room in some way. In order for us to find a path forward to improve these conditions, it will require a collaborative effort to do that. And we need to work as a team to figure out how to begin repairing that trust. So ultimately, the changes that we talked about, the things we're excited about, community opportunities, and even in some cases, many of these baseline needs that have to be addressed can be addressed. And if we can't come together as a unified group to do that and start repairing some of these challenges, figuring out what type of transparency needs to exist and what engagement can look like to make sure that things are done the way that this community is excited about, then it's not likely that another bond would be able to pass. And so we need to collaborate on finding the right path to get engaged partners to work through those challenges. And if we're not able to do that, then this will be a very challenging uphill battle for our kids. And I think if as an educator, a bleeding heart educator at the end of the day, that is something that I hope we can unify and rally around because it is important. It's very important for them. So I'm hopeful. I want to close things down for now. This has been an incredibly helpful conversation. I know it's a small group in the room tonight, but very meaningful and insightful conversations. We've captured your notes, we've captured your feedback back there. We've committed to answering questions that have surfaced in these workshops, so we will create a unified document that takes all the similar questions and then responds to them. That will be posted on Dearborn's website. Also, I believe this was filmed, and this could be found on the YouTube channel through Dearborn. So for those of you that want to reference that, that's available. And we are truly excited to work with your district to carve a path forward that can make this become a reality, and we can have a solid plan for the next 30 years we're excited about. So thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. And please come talk to us, and let's start imagining ways that we can engage further in these conversations to get more people at the table. So thank you.